Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Advanced Freelancing. It's been quite a while since you heard from just me, right? Well, get ready. I've got several solo episodes coming your way, and due to listener request, I'll be transferring back to more solo episodes in the near future. So you'll still hear from some freelance experts from other communities and places from time to time, but it's very clear that most of my listeners love listening to some of these solo episodes kind of peppered in with expertise from other guests. Today, I want to talk about something that's really challenging for a lot of freelancers and seems to be coming up a lot more now as a result of the pandemic. What do you do when a client wants to pull the plug, wants to cancel, or wants to decrease the packages and projects you're working on? Now, any business can make this decision for any reason at any time, right? Sometimes they might just be going through a challenging time with their company. Their marketing budget has been decreased. They're pivoting and offering something entirely new. There's really so many different reasons that companies can naturally come up against this situation. But of course, anytime that we're facing a recession or something like the pandemic, when questions are being raised about any project that's on the table and any expense in the business, you can definitely anticipate this becoming more likely with some of your clients. Now, just because a client wants to have a conversation about decreasing or dropping the project entirely doesn't mean that's the end of the story. Now, definitely, if this is a bigger client and they've already talked about it with their internal team and come to the decision that the project needs to halt entirely or they need to cancel the contract and pay the kill fee for canceling early, there's very little you can do at that point in time. But you want to get to the point where that is very rare, right? We don't want our clients blindsiding us with information that they've decided to cancel everything and throw out the baby with the bathwater with no notice for us. Most of you should have clauses inside your contract that require the client to give you a certain amount of notice. Now, if their business is going bankrupt, if they're shutting their doors, if this has happened to me, if the owner of the company passes away and it's really in flux who's going to take over, those are situations where you might not get the required notice, and you probably want to give your clients a little bit of grace if they're going through something especially difficult. But otherwise, your clients should adhere to what's listed in the contract as far as how long with advance notice they need to give you that the contract is ending. So it's most likely to happen towards the end of the month, towards the end of the quarter, and towards the end of your contract, right? Because these are naturally times when companies and teams are going to be taking a look at where they're spending their money or monitoring performance of campaigns to make that decision. So you never want to let your clients get to the point where they are having those conversations without any input from you. This does not mean that you are there and are present for the actual meeting. No, it actually means that you are doing some outreach prior to these natural endpoints where you're sending the client a report, you're discussing what's gone well and what can be improved, where you've made some type of outreach, essentially where you haven't let the situation just set it and forget it, right? That's what we don't want, is to deliver work for our clients. And then at the end of a 3-month contract, 1 week before the contract is up, when you realize you need to get it to renew, that shouldn't be the only time you're reaching out to your client to initiate the renewal conversation. You want to have a positive relationship throughout the length of the contract to make it much easier for them to be excited about reconsidering it. And if there's no input from you, their team is looking at this in a very simple, there is no gray area situation. They're looking at what is their return on investment and how much money are they spending on working with you. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, I always talk about if you are negotiating only on money or on price, it is nearly impossible to back yourself out of that corner. And so we don't ever want the conversation to be only about the amount of money that they spend on your projects. This is especially true when you're working on things that are a long game, like growing an organic social media following or SEO writing or things that just take some time to get traction. We want to set our clients up with reasonable expectations when they start working with us and keep in communication with them over the lifetime of the project so that you've kind of set yourself up for a win with the renewal conversation. You're not waiting until the company reaches out to you about the conversation. You are reaching out to them a few weeks in advance to discuss some of the achievements that you've already had. Now, if you have got some big wins for the client since you started working together, this anticipating a renewal conversation should definitely include that. Let's imagine that you're a writer who published articles for a client and those got picked up by traditional media and shared all over the internet or went viral or had hundreds of comments or really got great engagement on Facebook. The client probably told you about those accomplishments or you saw them organically as you worked on the project, but now is the perfect time to remind them of some of the wins you've gotten. Because at the end of a contract, it's so much easier for a client to look back and go, I don't really remember all the great things that happened, but I do remember how I wanted this to perform better, or there's any other negative aspects. You don't want the conversation to be about that. So direct the conversation pre-renewal by highlighting some of the things you've done well. Now, if your client seems open to it, i.e. they haven't had a company-wide meeting and already made the decision to cancel your contract, this preemptive work will really set you up to, at a minimum, have a conversation with the client about what their next step is. And it's very possible that in light of the pandemic or other issues, the package that you proposed previously doesn't work anymore. It might not be as simple as just renewing what you're already doing. You have to be willing to pivot and be adaptable in these situations because all businesses are being asked to do those things. And so you have to pivot and be adaptable on behalf of your clients by thinking carefully about what they need the most right now. So if that is something different than what you proposed 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a month ago, bring that up to them and suggest different things that might be more helpful. I'll give you an example from one of my coaching clients. There was a prospective client for this coaching client that really wouldn't benefit from the current offerings that the freelancer had. And I've had this situation myself recently where normally I would recommend blogging to just about all of my clients, but I was working with an attorney who just had no website presence at all. It made no sense for the first thing I recommended to him to be, yes, you need to be blogging 8 times a month. He didn't even have the website structure built out properly. He had no technical SEO elements on his page. And so when I wrote the proposal, it was very specific to where his business was at right there. And when my freelance coaching client went back to the prospective client and said, you know what, I don't think that blogging, continued blogging is going to make sense for you. What I am going to recommend is writing great lead magnets and having some email newsletter copy because you've already built up a following on your email newsletter list. And this is going to be the place where you can get the most sales right now. So as freelancers, it's on us to be mindful of situations happening in the greater economy and marketplace that are forcing our clients to have tough conversations. We have to be there with them. And in order to continue on the path of being taken seriously as a true partner of your freelance clients, you have to be willing to pivot and adapt too. If you've known for a couple of weeks that your client is struggling financially, but they really believe in your work, don't just turn around and offer them a renewed contract at the same rate with the same volume of work. Be sensitive to that. Think about where they can get wins right now. What is really going to be meaningful for their business right now? This gives them a chance to feel that continued positive relationship with you, that you have their best interests in mind, that you're not just selling things to sell things. You're being very strategic and specific in what you offer to your clients.
This podcast episode is sponsored by my course, The Guide to Killing It on Upwork. Inside the course, you'll learn all my secret tips and tricks for how to search for jobs, find the right clients, have an amazing profile that attracts people to work with you before they even know you, and how to write a killer pitch that gets your clients' attention and stands you way above the competition. If you're interested in learning more about how to enroll in this course, check out tinyurl.com/guide to Upwork course.
So if a client brings up to you this idea that they're thinking about decreasing the contract, one of the best things you can do is try to have a conversation around this, and not over email, an actual video conversation or a phone conversation about some of where the challenges are at. They may be misperceiving things, and you want to have the opportunity to correct that before they make a rash decision, like ending your contract altogether. So for example, maybe the client had unrealistic expectations about how a Facebook ad campaign was going to perform, or how involved it would be to truly update all of the development tools and plugins on your website. If they had unrealistic expectations and those weren't caught at the beginning of the relationship, they might simply be thinking about ending things because the project just isn't where they anticipated it to be. So if a project has gone off the rails, this is a good chance for you to step in and say, this is where we're at right now. Here are the next couple of things we're focusing on, and here's when you can expect to receive them. Having conversations with clients will also give you access to data that you will not find anywhere else. You will get a really good sense of what you can offer to the client, if anything, just by having these conversations, right? So it's really up to you to be the one to take that forward action step, to ask the client if you can chat about things, to do a monthly or quarterly recap of all the things you've done within the project. It makes them feel good that there's still forward progress being made on some of their goals, and removes some of that easiness about just saying, you know what, we're going to cancel this project altogether because it's a money issue. Now, if you get on the phone with your client, you're hunting for information about why they're not happy, why they're thinking about decreasing things. If there's something that you're at fault for in this conversation, by all means, own up to it. Just simply say, you know what, I do apologize for that. These were the circumstances around how that happened, and here's what I've put in place to make sure that isn't going to happen again. Or here's how we've gotten back on track since that point. If they were hoping for different results, you can kind of talk about some of the things that might have contributed to those results or not, right? I definitely have seen a lot of the metrics with my clients around the pandemic they're all over the place, right? Like web searching, podcast listening, it's all over the place. And so it's much less consistent than it was in the past. And it's your responsibility as a freelancer to have those conversations with your clients and say that, you know, this is the reason why this has happened, and here's how I've pivoted our strategy a little bit to be mindful of that. So as an example, running Facebook ad campaigns for a company, one of the things that I've learned recently is because people are on their phone more, they're at home more, they're spending a lot of time online, a lot of time on social media, they're more receptive to ads in some cases, but they're also much more likely to get annoyed with ads if they see them too many times. So Facebook measures something known as a frequency score, which is how often the same people are seeing the same ad. And if you see the same ad on Facebook or anywhere else over and over, it just annoys you to a certain point, right? You've seen it, you've already made the decision not to engage with it, and that can decrease the effectiveness of your campaign. So where previously my strategy might have been to swap out the copy and creative on Facebook ads every couple of months, that's become more frequent now as I watch that frequency score very carefully. And I'll tell my clients, like, you know, some of these strategies we've implemented that have been successful in the past in non-pandemic situations or whatever situation is going on, they're not working right now. And here's how I'm going to recommend that we pivot and adjust that. This is where your client sees you as a strategic partner. You have their best interests in mind. You're recognizing when something isn't working and you're adjusting it. Now, if a client just wants to decrease the quality and cost of their overall project working with you, it is your responsibility to think about whether there's any way to salvage the relationship. If it could do a great deal of damage for them to quit altogether, you need to tell the client that. And not from the perspective of, I don't want to lose your income as a freelancer, but from the perspective of, this is important for me to tell you that if you choose to stop working on your SEO efforts, if you suddenly stop posting on LinkedIn when you've built a great following there, there's going to be impacts from that will be very hard to build back from once you make that decision. So you might not recommend that the client proceed exactly as they were prior to making the decision to drop or decrease the size of the project. But what you are going to do is to make some recommendations with what I call things going on low maintenance mode, right? Maybe it's not achievable for them to be posting on LinkedIn every day. Maybe it's not affordable for them to be paying you to post on LinkedIn every day. This is where you put on your hat as a strategist and say, How can I salvage this relationship, not only to make sure that I keep the relationship and some of the revenue from it, but do the thing that the client needs the most right now? If people aren't engaging with their posts on LinkedIn the way that they were in the past, maybe you recommend dialing it down to just 2 times per week. That way they don't lose all of the traction they'd built up by being really active on that platform, but you're also not stressing them out with a high bill paying a freelancer to do it 5 times a week. So see how important it is to get on the phone and have these conversations, because your clients want to hear how you strategize through things. They want to hear you own up to when things maybe aren't performing as well, or the project hasn't been delivered as well, or communication wasn't as professional as they anticipated. But that's not where you leave it. You leave with a next action step of what you recommend they do going forward. And when you can do this honestly, with integrity, and recommend things that are going to benefit the client now, even if that does mean honoring their original request to cancel the project or decrease the size of the project, it's far better to do that than to come across as desperate and trying to keep the relationship just for the sake of keeping it. So there's lots of things that you can do when a client talks about needing to be mindful of their budget or being concerned that they're not getting great results. But you don't want those conversations to happen after it's too late. You need to be proactive in how you reach out to your clients and how you structure these conversations. You might just be able to save a relationship altogether. Now, listeners, many of you already know that my second book, 6-Figure Freelancer, is coming out on October 20th, 2020. By pre-ordering the book, you'll get 4 exclusive bonuses, and you'll be involved and entered in giveaways and other opportunities for prizes. You can learn more about those bonuses and the book by going to 6figurefreelancebook.com.